Being able to drop items out of your inventory seems like an understandable menu design in a game like Dark Souls. A player's inventory can get full of unnecessary weapons or materials that clog everything up. But allowing the player to drop anything out of their inventory is something that sounds obviously problematic. On a basic level, I think that's something that we could all agree on. With the current systems that are in place, too many issues could arise from a new player dropping something they didn't know they shouldn't drop. Because of this, From Software has some restrictions in place to prevent the player from dropping anything important. But imagine if you could drop anything you wanted in Dark Souls, even key items. What kind of broken shenanigans could you pull off? It sounds like an interesting what-if question, something that isn't possible but would be fun to theorize about. In this case, however, there is a way to drop anything you want in Dark Souls, and it's possible using an obscure glitch known as drop swap. If you're interested in more content like this, make sure you leave a like, drop a sub, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Normally in Dark Souls, when you select an item, a list of options appear. Use, drop, change order, and reset order. The drop option is the one that we're interested in. As long as you're not stuck in an animation that prevents it, most items will have this drop option available to use. However, some will be struck out with a line through the middle, signifying you can't drop this one. And of course, when you try to select it, the action won't go through. But if you go to an adjacent inventory category, then swap back to the previous category while also selecting the item to pull up the list of options, you can notice that for a split second, the drop option is available before quickly being stricken out again. If you pre-highlight the drop prompt, it will default to this option. So if you're fast enough, you can actually select this drop action before the game disables it. Testing this out myself, I wasn't able to execute it with the default bindings, but using mouse and keyboard controls on the remaster, I was able to bind the confirmation action to mouse scroll to brute force the input timing. For Prepare to Die Edition, I used some speedrunner Steam rebinds that maps the mouse click to my Xbox controller's X button. If you managed to get this to work on controller with the default binds, let me know, because I was finding it difficult to do myself. Once executing this admittedly difficult menuing, you can drop any item in the game, even the dark sign. It will appear as a simple goods bag on the ground, and if you quit out, it disappears, curing the undead curse forever. Roll credits. What else can we do with this power? Let's investigate. The first thing you might think is that you can use this to softlock yourself, and that's true. But it's not as easy as it sounds because of the existence of the chest in Firelink Shrine. As a failsafe, From Software included an empty chest in Firelink that will fill with any important key items you may have found a way to lose that could prevent you from finishing the game. So you could drop swap the Lord Vessel, but it would appear in the Firelink chest anyways, preventing a softlock. There is, however, one way that we can softlock ourselves in the Asylum on the very first new game cycle, preventing us from reaching the Firelink chest at all. If you could drop swap the key in the cell, that would work. But you don't have any materials in the inventory category that is adjacent to the key items category to swap from. We need an upgrade material to drop swap away any key items. Well, there just so happens to be one enemy in the Asylum that can drop a Titanite shard at around a 2% drop rate. The undead soldier guarding the locked door on the second floor past the balcony. If you can farm a Titanite shard from this enemy, you can drop swap the Big Pilgrim's key before opening the door, leaving you stuck in the undead Asylum permanently, unable to progress. There may be other ways to softlock yourself with this glitch, but this was the only one I could think of because of the Firelink chest. Leave a comment if you have any ideas though. Searching for softlocks is obvious though, and we'll cover another one later in the video, but what else can we do with this glitch? There are many other interesting quirks of the game we can witness by abusing this glitch. From useful gameplay strategies to merely insights into the underlying programming that the game runs on. The first of which I'll point out is a hidden trade you can make with the crows. There happens to be a valid exchange with Snuggly if you drop swap the dried finger into the nest. Despite not normally being a droppable item, if dropped, once you reload the game, you will receive a blue Titanite chunk as a reward for your dried finger. Maybe this means that at one point the dried finger was a droppable item, but they changed their mind on this during development while not removing the actual trade with the crows. This is a moderately useful gameplay feature if you're in need of blue Titanite chunks, but it's only one and they're not too difficult to farm from crystal golems throughout the game if you really need some. There are more useful gameplay strategies that utilize drop swap though, one of which involves the Ring of Favor and Protection. Normally, if you want to remove the Ring of Favor and Protection, you would get a prompt about the ring breaking upon removal. Because of the minimal amount of ring slots in Dark Souls 1, there are many situations where it would be nice to swap out this ring in favor of something else. But you don't want to lose it forever, so begrudgingly you'll keep it equipped. But what if you could just drop it on the ground instead of removing it from your ring slot? Normally, the drop option would be inaccessible due to the game not allowing you to drop anything that is equipped. But drop swap is a solution for this problem. Instead of removing the ring normally, you simply drop swap it to the ground, which will remove the ring from your slot without prompting you to break it. This frees up your ring slot, but allows you to put the ring back on afterwards. Useful gameplay interactions for drop swap are nice to have, and there are certainly more to come, but this glitch can also be useful for gaining more insight into how some things work under the hood. An example of this comes from dropping certain key items that confer special effects to the player. For example, obtaining the Lord Vessel grants the player the ability to warp to bonfires. But even if you lose the Lord Vessel by dropping it on the ground out of your inventory, once it has been acquired, this effect stays with the player. This makes sense because the Lord Vessel is removed from your inventory when placed at the Firelink altar, but you still maintain the ability to warp between bonfires. This is also true for the Rite of Kindling. The Rite of Kindling grants the ability to kindle bonfires even further than 10 Estus up to 20. Similarly to the Lord Vessel though, this effect is given to the player as a permanent buff for that new game cycle. Even if you drop the Rite on the ground, you're still able to kindle up to 20. What's happening here is that the game doesn't actually care that you have these items in your inventory. After acquiring them, certain flags are set that grant these new abilities to the player regardless of whether you keep the items in your inventory or not. For example, flag 710 is for the Lord Vessel, and flag 275 is for the Rite of Kindling. Despite this, the game will still spawn the Rite of Kindling in the Firelink chest should you happen to drop swap it out of your inventory, simply because it's a key item, even though it has no use immediately after it has been added to your inventory. This also sheds light on the relevance of the Firelink chest. Pretty much any key item, even if unimportant or useless, will be retrievable from the chest if you manage to remove it from your inventory after acquiring it. The drop swap can also be useful for duplicating items in a variety of interesting ways. This includes the Estus Flask. Anytime you perform a drop swap to the Estus Flask, it will drop an amount of charges in the flask corresponding to the quantity of the item you have performed the swap from. For example, if you swap from an upgrade material that you have 1 of, it will drop 1 charge. If you have 10 of that material, it will drop 10 charges. If you pick those up, it will add the charges back into your flask. However, once you have emptied the flask of charges this way, the game won't drop the empty flask on the ground, it will just show an empty flask. You can then pick these charges back up off the ground, and then you have 2 Estus flasks. Resting at a bonfire will fill the empty one back up, and now you have 2 full Estus flasks. You can do this infinitely, so you'll never be at risk of running out of heals. You can also use drop swap to duplicate spells. There are easier ways to duplicate spells sold by merchants using another glitch called quantity storage. However, spells that are not for sale don't qualify for this method. So if you want to dupe certain spells like Darkbead, you can resort to this drop swap method. For some unknown reason, in Framp's feed menu, if you use a glitch called prompt swap to sell the quantity of a consumable into the ring slot by wrapping the menu category from the left all the way back to the right, the game stores an initial quantity of -1. Quantity storage and prompt swapping are glitches outside of the scope of this video, but basically doing this will store an internal quantity of -1. So when you perform the drop swap to the spell, this initial quantity is used as the amount of copies the game should drop. And from here, it's simple math. Dropping a negative quantity results in a positive quantity, giving you an extra copy of the spell instead of dropping it on the ground. Funny enough, a goods bag will appear on the ground afterwards, but if you pick it up, it will be nothing. This is maybe the only useful known application of the drop swap for speedrunning purposes. The New Game Plus speedrun categories can utilize extra copies of both Power Within and Darkbead for additional casts throughout the run, without having to rest at a bonfire. This glitch is what makes this possible without having to scale the game further into higher new game cycles. There is one more method of item duping that is possible with drop swap, and to me, this is the most interesting way to abuse this glitch so far: Firelink chest duping. As previously covered in this video, the Firelink chest is designed to add a copy of a lost key item or anything that is deemed necessary for the completion of the game. This occurs by an event script in Firelink that checks flags on loading a Firelink whether the player should have a certain set of items. If not, this script will add the item to the chest. This can be abused to duplicate the Covenant of Artorias without even using any glitches, as it is a ring which is a readily droppable item that is considered crucial to completing the game. You can simply drop the ring in a loading zone that is adjacent to Firelink while it's unloaded, then load Firelink again. The script will run on load, notice that you don't have the Covenant of Artorias, and then place a copy of the ring in the chest. You can pick up this copy of the ring, then go back to the copy that you dropped and pick it up as well. Now you have 2 Covenants of Artorias. This can be done for any items that the chest will spawn, which through the use of drop swap is pretty much all of them. Unfortunately, you can only hold one of these key items at a time. If you try to pick up the duplicated copy of the item, it will instantly drop itself back on the ground if you already have the other in your inventory. However, there is one way we can abuse this to an extreme effect. Executing the Firelink chest dupe with the Lord Soul can allow for some wacky results by offering multiple of the same Lord Soul to the Lord Vessel. Executing this is a little trickier than the Covenant of Artorias dupe because of 2 reasons. 1, we can't carry multiple of the same Lord Soul at once. And 2, dropping the Lord Soul from too far away will have the effect of loading zones despawning one of the Lord Soul copies before you can offer both of them. For example, you can drop swap a Lord Soul with Firelink unloaded, then reload Firelink, and the script will fill the chest with the corresponding Lord Soul. You can then pick up the soul in the chest and use Framp to warp you downward to Firelink Altar. This is necessary because any load screens would despawn the dropped Lord Soul and prevent us from picking it back up, and Framp is the only way to exit Firelink Altar without a load screen. After warping down with Framp, we can offer the Lord Soul from the chest to the Lord Vessel, but entering Firelink Altar will despawn the dropped item anyways because you have moved too far away and unloaded the area it's located in, resulting in only one Lord Soul to be offered. Another option would be to drop swap the Lord Soul from far away, run back to Firelink to have it appear in the chest, then walk back to obtain the Lord Soul you just dropped. However, doing this will actually cause the item in the Firelink chest to despawn once it runs the script to check your items. The chest will still be closed, but there won't be an item inside. So what you have to do is drop the Lord Soul in an in-between location that will remain loaded while Firelink is loaded, so the script that checks your inventory won't run when you eventually retrieve the dropped Lord Soul. Then move to a location that will unload Firelink, but keep the dropped item intact. Then reload Firelink to trigger the script and spawn the item in the chest. Without opening the chest, you can then retrieve the dropped Lord Soul, which is close enough that Firelink won't deload again and won't run the check inventory script again. If done correctly, you will have both the dropped Lord Soul and the chest spawned Lord Soul in Firelink Shrine next to Frampt. You could alternatively pick up the Lord Soul from the chest and walk back the one on the ground by continuously picking it up from a distance to move the item bag closer and closer to Frampt. But this is a little less convenient if you know how to manipulate the load zones properly. From here, you can take the Lord Soul in your inventory, warp down with Framped, and offer it along with any other Lord Souls in your inventory to the Lord Vessel. The other Lord Soul won't have despawned, so you can warp back up by talking to Framped again, pick up the other one, then go back down and offer it too. This is where things get weird. What happens when you offer a Lord Soul to the Lord Vessel is, the game sets the flag 756 to be true in the Lord Vessel's scripting. An event script function listens for this flag to be set and then plays the offering animation. Then the game looks to see which Lord Souls you own and if you haven't offered them yet. If you haven't, those Lord Souls in your inventory will set a flag that it was offered and then be subsequently removed from your inventory. Afterwards, flag 756 is unset. But when you offer the same Lord Soul a second time, this function plays out, but it cannot finish since no new Lord Souls were offered. This means that flag 756 is not unset, and every time the Kiln of the First Flame map becomes loaded, the Lord Soul offering animation will play out. This result is goofy enough on its own, but there's more. If you try to offer Lord Souls to the Lord Vessel again, your character won't do anything, but it will close the Lord Vessel menu and leave you unable to do anything else, essentially softlocked until you force close the game. The next time the player retrieves a new Lord Soul and reloads the Kiln map, regardless of whether you're sitting at the Lord Vessel or not, you will play out the offering animation and place the new Lord Soul into the Lord Vessel. This will complete the function and resume the game like normal, except the character once again will go into a bonfire resting animation with no menu and unable to escape without a force quit. Although you can escape this by closing the game, this is maybe one of the most convoluted methods of obtaining a softlock in the entire game. Another odd consequence of being able to place the Lord Souls into the Lord Vessel from a distance like this is that you can also trigger the cutscene to open the kiln from an area that isn't Firelink altar, as long as the script is resolved with the fourth and final Lord Soul. To me, the most interesting example of this is acquiring the final Lord Soul from the Four Kings. After crossing the fog wall, you can drop into the abyss, and while falling midair, the kiln map will load, which will cause your character to play out the offering animation during the drop. From here, you can battle the kings until victory. After the king's death cutscene ends, the fourth Lord Soul will be dropped into your inventory, and then, seemingly out of nowhere, the cutscene to open the Kiln of the First Flame will immediately start to play. And of course, once arriving back into Firelink Altar, you will find that the door is indeed open for you to enter the final area of the game. Absolute cinema. At the end of it all though, you will only have the one duplicated Lord Soul still sitting in your inventory, but with nowhere to go as the other Lord Souls option is no longer available. I hope you enjoyed today's video and maybe learned something new. While trying to research topics for this one, I came across some of the interesting interactions that this glitch can cause, and I thought it would be a really interesting topic to cover. I want to thank some fellow speedrunners and glitch hunters, Kahmul78 and Androv T, for their help with making this video. Their knowledge of the game is always extremely valuable when trying to understand how the game functions underneath. But that's going to be all for today's video. I hope to see you for the next one, and of course, thanks for watching.